Jar Jar Binks. You are listening to Behind the Lens.
And yes, you are listening to Behind the Lens. Welcome back to our last week, our last Monday in November. It's hard to believe that 2017 is almost gone, and we've got 3 more shows in December before Christmas and New Year's, and then we're back to start our 4th year on Adrenaline Radio, so that's exciting. We've got great guests all through the month of December for you. Today, an incredible show today. I am so thrilled. Director JACOB KORNBLUTH is back with us today. Our regular listeners may remember that JACOB was on earlier this year with his brother Josh to talk about their comedy Love and Taxes. Of course, JACOB is also known for his documentary work, most notably with Robert Reich, former U.S. Labor Secretary to Bill Clinton, and now one of the most vocal advocates of enlightening and educating the public on economic issues. He's a professor at Berkeley. I had the pleasure of speaking with Bob and JACOB several years ago with their first film together, INEQUALITY FOR ALL. Now, the two are back with Saving Capitalism. It's available on Netflix as of the 21st. Some of you may have seen it over the Thanksgiving weekend. Once again, things are laid out very clearly. We get a great history, and it's just another great venture between JACOB and Bob. They have been, since INEQUALITY for All, they've been doing a series of short films that I want to talk to JACOB about as well, little 3 to 4 minute shorts explaining various components and issues involving the economy today and where we're at, where we're going, and what needs to happen if we want to see any change. So I'm very thrilled to have JACOB back with us at the midpoint of the show. But before then, last week we heard a little bit about Coco. This weekend, you all got to see it. Made it the #1 film at the box office. I am so thrilled to see that. I mean, this truly is. It is an absolute. It is a wonder, a kaleidoscopic explosion of color and culture. It is the best animated film of the year. It is the best film in Pixar's arsenal. They have just surpassed themselves every way, shape, and form with this film. Most notably thanks to production designer Harley Jessup and also lighting designer Danielle Feinberg. The film is directed by Lee Unkrich, co-directed by Adrian Molina, who also was a writer. And as many of you know, I sat down and spoke with Lee and Adrian and one of the film's producers, Darla Anderson, to talk about some of the components that make up the wonder that is Coco. Last week, you got to hear a little bit as they talked about the music, which is so key, so important. And Academy voters, Remember Me, original song, Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, the team that gave us Let It Go with Frozen. Remember Me is just as memorable, be it in English or in Spanish. So I fully expect to see that garner an Oscar nomination for Best Original Song come Oscars. Everything on the level of Coco is award-worthy, with Guild Awards, with Animation Awards. And for my money, as I have said repeatedly since I first saw the film, for my money, this film is a contender for an actual Best Picture nomination in addition to Best Animated Feature. Whether that will happen, I don't know. But when you look at the component parts of a film, from voice cast or performance to scripting to your production design to your lighting design, here you have the component of animation, costuming. A lot of people don't realize or recognize that an animation film, all of this gets created by way of models, and not just in a computer. There is actual physical, tangible construction going on in order to create the animation that we see. So it is a wonder, and it is the best thing that Pixar's ever done. Um, so last week I briefed you on skeletons. Skeletons are a huge part of Coco, as we all have seen for those that went to the theater this weekend. But these aren't your typical skeletons. Skeletons, though, have a very important part in the history of Disney, going back to the days of silly symphonies and the skeleton dance of 3 skeletons that everybody manages to pull up on YouTube come Halloween. Well, Disney has taken the art of the skeleton, and with the animators on Coco, including one, I have to give her a shout out, Daniela Streleva, who did the design for Mama Imelda and Frida, in addition to many of the other skeletons. But she was the primary animator and designer on those 2 skeletons in particular. And Mama Imelda is a force to be reckoned with in the film, I assure you, if you haven't seen it. But let's take a look now. Let's take a listen now to hear what Lee and Darla and Adrian had to say about designing the skeletons for Coco.
This is an explosion.
Keep them coming.
Yeah, thank you.
An explosion of color and culture. This is something we've never seen. And I've got to say, as fantastic as The Good Dinosaur was and the work that was done with lighting and what Harley Jessup did with production design, Danielle here in Harley, out of this world.
We agree.
This is, I've never seen anything like it. If there was an Oscar category for production design for animation for Harley, I'd be handing him an Oscar.
I wish he could get into the normal production design category. I don't think it'll ever happen, but he deserves it. It's a huge amount of work. He did an amazing job.
Everything on this film. But I've got to talk to you more about the technical aspects of this film, because you're dealing with a lot of new things. You take the render man to a new level with the light reflection and refraction and of course your particle light. That it's a whole new ball game with particle light, and you really make the most of it as a storytelling tool. But also manipulating skeletons. I mean, Disney, we go all the way back. Only before Walt Disney, Elias had done the one short with skeletons, but this is a hallmark.
Well, we knew it was going to be a big challenge for us on a lot of fronts. And so we started by doing a survey of everything that had been done with animated skeletons in the history of cinema. Everything from those early shorts, the early Iwerks animated Disney short,
Jason and the Argonauts.
to Ray Harryhausen's animation, to Tim Burton's animated work. And that was to make sure that we carved out our own unique, specific place design-wise that was different from what anyone had done. But we had one goal that maybe was different on this film than anyone has, which is we wanted our skeletons to be appealing. We weren't going for ghoulish or frightening. In our minds, they were just characters. They were people that were once living people. And so we didn't want their skeletonness to be off-putting at all. And so we made a lot of choices early on, like giving them eyeballs, which we thought would kind of make it easier for the audience to connect with them on a soulful level. But at the same time that we were trying to keep them more like real people, we also wanted to find ways to embrace the entertainment potential of skeletons that could be falling apart all the time and having to put themselves back together. And there were a lot of tests done early on to just kind of figure out what that visual vocabulary was going to be for the skeletons.
I mean, it's fabulous. And you have the skeleton motif throughout the Land of the Dead. I'm even looking at the flooring, at the street, the cobblestones. And it looks like you've got femurs and tibias in there. I mean, the minutiae, the attention to detail is fabulous.
That was important to Lee from early on. He wanted skeleton, skull references.
I like the idea of being subtle with it. Like they're kind of almost like accidental skeletons and skulls that are formed when you're at a certain angle, looking at scenes.
And the light bulb.
Yeah, just even like a light bulb. The light bulbs in the Land of the Dead, I realized light bulbs kind of look like a skull shape. So we embraced them by doing filaments inside that kind of enhanced the feeling of a skull face. I just didn't want cartoony skeleton land. I wanted it to be rooted in a kind of relatable, very Mexican feeling, and but then acknowledge that it is a Land of the Dead, so what can we do to make it unique and entertaining?
And entertaining it is indeed. If you haven't seen Coco already, I can't encourage you enough. Take tissues. But to see this wonderful cultural experience explode and really broken down for those of us that aren't familiar with it. And we learn about the land of the dead and the Alfredas and the offerings on the one night of the year when the souls can pass over. And to see all of this in this, as I said, kaleidoscope of color. It is truly, truly beautiful. The Marigold Bridge with all these individual petals that are constructed with each one of the petals lit from underneath with this new technique of particle light is absolutely outstanding. And using that, the particle light also, as you heard Lee talking about, it allowed them to do more with the skeleton motif in addition to really working on creating the skeleton and giving it texture and life. So there we have skeletons. We've got more. I've got more on Coco that you'll be able to find at behindthelensonline.net. But right now, let's shift some gears. Wonderstruck. Several weeks ago, you heard my exclusive interview with cinematographer Ed Lockman, one of the finest cinematographic jobs of the year, bringing together a meld of black and white and color. The sound design on the film, Todd Haynes, as a director, has created another masterful work where part of the film is shot very much like a silent film. The present day in the 1970s focuses on a young boy who loses his hearing, which ties in with the heroine in the black and white segment of the film, going back decades, who is deaf. So, I mean, it just all comes together. But when you have a situation like that, where you have part of your film silent, then you have a young boy who's deaf in a sonic world, music is your key component. Well, for the music on Wonderstruck, none other than composer Carter Burwell. Carter is a frequent collaborator with director Todd Haynes. His scoring with Carol 2 years ago was beautiful. And this year, Carter's got a trifecta going. He's got Wonderstruck. He's got Goodbye Christopher Columbus that he scored for Simon Curtis, and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri for writer and director Martin McDonough. So I had a chance to sit down with Carter the day before Wonderstruck opened in Los Angeles and talk to him about all 3 films, even though I had not seen 3 Billboards at that point, which has since been rectified, by the way. So take a listen to my interview with Carter Burwell.
Not only do you have Wonderstruck, but you have Goodbye Christopher Robin. Mm-hmm. And you have 3 Billboards. Goodbye Christopher Robin, exquisite. Whimsical, exquisite. I love it.
Great.
Wonderstruck, I'm enchanted by the score.
Great.
I mean, I am, and then I listened to, Jeff was kind enough to send me, because I'm not seeing 3 Billboards until the 25th.
Okay.
So he sent me the score, the themes, so I could hear them. Totally different.
It's pretty different. And you'll see the film is pretty different.
It's pretty different.
Yeah.
Well, it's Martin's film, so I have to say, Carter, this is so beautiful what you have constructed with each of them, but with Wonderstruck, this is a very unique film because of the very nature of it, with the 2 time periods and the fact that ultimately underlying is the fact that in Rose's time, not only is this a silent film, but she's deaf.
Right.
And then we face the same thing with Ben, but in a hearing world. Because in a silent film world, we're not hearing anything, which makes music even more important. How did you approach scoring this film? When you got the phone call from Todd and you got the script, how did you approach this? Because as I listen to, there's a very ethereal quality to this score. Your silent whispers, it's very melodic with bells. You've got The Daughter of the Storm is just traditional silent film, heavy organ, fabulous. But then throughout other excerpts, you have chimes and triangles, it sounds like, and a couple little instant snare drums. And they're all very identifiable as to who we're with and what we're doing.
Right.
So I'm curious how you approach this, and then once you had the score, how you develop the orchestrations for this with the very specific instrumentation.
Well, so given the script, where it was, obvious that large sections of the film were completely silent, not only do they not have dialogue, but they don't even have sound effects. They don't even have the sound of a room. So it was just obvious that there would be a great deal of music, and so Todd and I began talking about what that music's going to do well before he shot the film.
Mm-hmm.
We would talk about once a week, get on the phone, just throw out more ideas. It could do this, it could do that, should it do that? What does the music comment on the deafness? To what extent does the music comment on the different time periods? Is the music more about distinguishing between the characters, or more about bringing them together? We've talked about a lot of these things. In the end, I usually find those conversations, I really enjoy those conversations, but it's only when you actually have the film, and it's only when you actually start writing music, that it all really means anything. So for Wonderstruck, I actually began somewhere around the middle of the movie. I began with the scene where they're in the Museum of Natural History and they're looking at the dioramas. Because that's when the characters from both time periods come together.
Right.
And I wanted to see if I had something that could really work for all of them together. And I quickly noticed that percussion worked, that marimba and glockenspiel, you say triangle.
It was either a xylophone or a glockenspiel that I was hearing in here, and I wasn't sure which.
It's glockenspiel. Well, there's all sorts of things. There's also a percussion instrument called allophone, but there's no xylophone, but they're vibraphone. A large number of percussion instruments. It seemed right. I can now, looking back, analyze the various reasons that I think it's right. First one thing, it just seems childlike. There's a sense of wonder, but also these are the kind of instruments that you encounter in any kindergarten classroom. You'll see wood blocks and sandpaper and triangle and things like that. But another reason, now that I look back on it and watch the film, another reason why it works so well, I think, is that they're not sentimental instruments. With those instruments playing the lead lines, I never had to worry about falling into sentimentality. And that's great, because these kids, they don't either. These kids are they suffer terrible loss and terrible setbacks, all frankly from all through the movie until the very end. But they don't sentimentalize themselves. They're always problem solving, and so the percussion, I think, also worked for that reason.
And I notice you also bring much of that same instrumentation into City and the Stars at the very end of the film, where we now have the adult Rose and the young Ben.
Right.
And of course Jaden.
Right, yes.
This musicality that you have come up with it is enchanting. That is the word for this.
Oh, thank you.
And it really makes you feel the wonder of what both of these kids are experiencing on two totally different levels.
It's, the film, I think for any composer, this film is an amazing opportunity. Also, big responsibility.
Yeah.
But an amazing opportunity. And I'm very fortunate to be given a canvas like that.
Now, when you are composing, especially in a situation like this one, is it more with getting the melody to begin with and then worrying about the instrumentation or an orchestration, or are you thinking immediately of, okay, I want a sound of a glockenspiel, I want a sound of chimes?
That's a good question. For me, I begin with melody and harmony and then go on to orchestration. It's, a lot of times in film, for a variety of reasons, a composer will work with an orchestrator, and I have as well. but it was, I don't know, I just felt that this film was so personal for me, and that I really, and that also the instrumentation, those choices would be so important, that I, orchestrated this one myself, and didn't let anyone help me. But that takes a certain amount of time. But I did think that in this case, those choices are just so particular, and like deciding this moment is at, the marimba, is at the allophone. And I mean, it's certain, to a certain extent, it's true in any film. But I felt in this case it was especially true. But for myself, the basically melody, harmony, things like that come first, and then I'll begin working on the orchestrations after that.
But I have to say, your selection of instrumentation is as unique and eclectic as each of the exhibits within the museum, and each of the little toys and things that Ben has in his bedroom as a collector, as his mother calls him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think, for one thing, if you're going to have 80 minutes of music in the movie, you have to have a wide variety. You have to be able to, keep it moving around and keep it fresh, so that you can't just, it can't sit on one melody, and it can't sit on one set of instruments either. It has to be constantly moving. Which makes it a little bit, as you say, like a museum collection. It has to be, it can't just be this one thing. You have to be able to walk around and experience a variety.
It makes a film very sensory. Even though we have a silent film and we have 2 deaf children, it's totally auditory. It's a complete sensory experience.
No, that's great. Thank you.
From the sonic standpoint, and I just love that. But then I take a look at a film like Goodbye Christopher Robin, which is more traditional in the terms of sweeping.
Right, it is.
But then you also have some very distinctive, again, instrumentation in there. You take a look at, Bear Hunt. And, that's darker and it's more booming. Like they're going after a big, huge bear instead of a tiny little. But, then you have Balloon Escape, which is very wafting. And something that I noticed you have a specific theme for While We Were Young. And that comes back in, or When We Were Young, and that pops up within other melodies that are popping up throughout the film.
Yeah, that's sort of that theme is, that's the first book that has Winnie the Pooh in it, and so that theme is basically that. It's the theme for the books and their success, and then it will later be the theme for the burden of that success. That's right. I think in Christopher Robin, one of the interesting things, if we're talking about themes, is that there's I think the piece is called Drawing Pooh, but it's the scene in which A. Milne has decided he's going to write. One of my favorites.
Okay. I made notes of my favorite ones.
Okay.
It sounds like you have some harp in there. It's very lilting and very whimsical.
Well, so it's also, and melodically, that's the that's when it all comes together, and that's sort of like a big moment. That's when they they start drawing Winnie the Pooh, start writing the book, and you realize that's what's going on. But it happens about halfway into the film, and we made this decision, Simon and I, that we wouldn't state that theme until then. Like, that's sort of, in a way, the main theme of the movie, but we wouldn't state it until you're in the middle of the movie, which is, there's a logic to it, but it's also a little strange. Most films, even at the beginning, they'd have the little sort of overture, you'd say something about it, but we felt it was important that when Winnie finally makes his appearance as a character, that everything changes, and so we just withheld that sort of the main theme of the movie until you were halfway through.
Well, I have to say, it's like when I listen to When We Were Young, it feels like somebody's skipping. No matter where it pops up within the score, it feels like someone is skipping. And it is just so enchanting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, both of these films, I can honestly say these are my 2 favorite scores of the year.
Wow.
Out of all the scores I've heard all year, these are my 2 favorites.
Oh, thank you.
Because the emotionality that goes into each of them it really resonates and captures each specific film. And the one, Wonderstruck, that's not an easy one to capture with emotionality.
Right. No, it's. I mean,
Pooh, we all know we're going to cry.
That was not an easy job. No, you're right. Wonderstruck is. There's a lot in there. So many different themes, and also these emotionally. Almost overwhelming moments, but a lot of the times when the emotion is in the film is most overwhelming is when the music actually kind of pulls back and gets extremely sort of restrained, because we really, partly because it's kids, I think Todd and I just really didn't want it to feel like the music was the thing that was making you cry. We wanted it to be the restraint was making you cry, like when you see Julianne Moore's character, she doesn't talk, and there's so much going on, but she she can't say it. It's that that it should be pushing you to tears, not music tugging at you.
Yeah, and same thing with Goodbye Christopher Robin. That just the story itself. I mean, you need 5 boxes of tissues to get through that movie. It's just hands down. But then your score comes on top of that, and it's just like, okay, maybe we better have a 6 box just to be sure. But then I listened to all of these excerpts from 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing. Totally and completely different. Which, everything of yours is so distinctive. It's like what you did for The Founder last year for John Lee. I mean, wonderful. But, that had very strong personalities, a very strong business subject. Right. So your tones were very, very different. I now cannot wait to see 3 Billboards, because I'm listening to this, I'm hearing a lot of mandolin and guitar, very Spanish influenced, Mexican influenced in here with all of these songs. It just, and then you actually have some actual vocal tracks interspersed in there, I noticed. You've got Joan Baez.
Right, yes. Yeah.
And then you've got The Last Rose of Summer.
Right.
Done in operatic.
Yeah, it's from an opera called Martha by so it's an Irish tune, an Irish poem, but set by a German composer.
And that's the one thing that sounds very Irish out of what I listened to.
Right. Yes.
How do you approach a film like that? And knowing Martin and his darker and more sarcastic tones, shall we say?
That's fair. Yeah.
That's a good way to describe Martin. How do you approach something like that? You're not dealing with children, which is its own special kind of ideology. And
the film is very dark, but it's, as you say, Martin has sarcastic tones, and there's a great deal of dark humor in this movie. But it's also very it operates at a much more at the level of sincere human feeling more than his previous 2 films. It's very different in that way. It's you'll see. It's complex, and it's I've forgotten what your actual question was.
Well, no, just about your approach with 3 Billboards, because now you're saying it complex.
It's
the music sounds complex in this one.
Well, the music plays largely the character that's played by Fran McDormand, and she operates in that film in 2 modes. Sometimes she's at war with the police in that town, and sometimes she's a mom. But she has suffered this loss even before the movie begins that drives her to go to war with the police, and those are mainly the 2 themes. There's the theme of her at war and the theme of that loss, and as the movie gets more and more expansive with its violence and darkness, it's important that we establish that theme of loss just in the first few seconds of the film, because that's really what motivates everything. But it goes so far off the rails by the end that you could easily it would be easy sometimes to forget that that's what it's really all about, is her and even when she goes pretty far off the rails, you want to be sympathetic because of the loss she suffered as a mom, but also she's Fran McDormand and she's just a sympathetic actor.
You know, I mean, I've been such a fan of your work for decades. And, you know, going back to Mystery Alaska, still a beautiful score. And, of course, Fur, an imaginary portrait of Diane Arbus, is stunning.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, what speaks to you with a project that will lure you in and get you involved, besides Todd Haynes picking up the phone?
Well, you know, I mean, I love, like probably most people, I love doing something I haven't done before. So, you know, that's one thing that counts for something. If the film seems like it's either a different type of film or it's calling for a different type of music, then that's always good. And a lot of it, honestly, has to do with the director. You know, I never would have done Twilight if it weren't that Catherine Hardwicke called me. You know, don't have any abiding interest in teen romances, but Catherine, you know, she's a really interesting director, and she convinced me she was going to do something interesting with that film. So a lot of it has to do with the director as well.
Mm-hmm. How long does it take you on average, like for Wonderstruck? How long does it take to complete a score?
Well, that one is, you'd think there'd be a simple answer to that, but there isn't. On average, it's, you know, first let me say, the real question is how long will they give me? I don't control the schedule.
I'm not going to ask you that one.
Yeah, they tell me when it's due. So on average, they give me about 6 weeks. That's probably an average. Wonderstruck, it was more because we knew it was a gigantic job, and even after probably 3 months, 2 or 3 months, maybe 3 months, we recorded it. But then the next week, Todd and I were still talking about new ideas, and so when the film showed it at Cannes in May, we'd actually removed some of the stuff we'd recorded, and I'd written a few new things and just put them in with synthesizers for the Cannes screening, and then we finally recorded those in August. So I can't even say,
wow,
you know, how long that took, because it's been an ongoing thing, and I could safely say that if the movie weren't opening this Friday, we would still be talking about it and writing music, I'm sure.
And the movie Wonderstruck did open the following day after I spoke with Carter. All 3 of his films are currently out now. Wonderstruck, Goodbye Christopher Robin, and 3 Billboards. 3 Billboards, I think Frances McDormand is a front runner for Oscar nomination this year. She just picked up a Spirit Award nomination on Tuesday, but I think she is our current front runner for Oscar. And Carter's competing against himself, but I have to say, now having heard more scores, I have to add Alexandre Desplat to my top 3 for his score in The Shape of Water, which is, there are no words to describe the magic and the majesty of what Alexander has created. So you've heard on animation and skeletons and score, and now we're going to talk capitalism with the wonderful JACOB Kornbluth. Hi, Jacob.
Hi. How are you?
I am fine. I am so thrilled to have you back on Behind the Lens.
I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm just, I fell in love with you and Bob back when we talked about Inequality for All. When we sat down at the SLS Hotel, and that documentary really changed me. It educated me on so many levels of things that I had a cursory idea about, but really dug in deep. You've been doing little video shorts the past few years, but now you give us Saving Capitalism based on Bob's book of the same name. Another absolutely incredible documentary that every American needs to see.
Well, thank you for saying that. And it's interesting that you go back to Inequality for All as the beginning of our relationship, but also as you introduce Saving Capitalism, because I think of it a little bit as one continuous project from that film to this film, in terms of trying to put the issues of economic inequality and its consequences for not just our economy, but also our democracy front and center for people to see and understand. So,
And I think I think you do that so well, and I agree with you that it is a continuation, because as you know, is so eloquently pointed out in Saving Capitalism, you know, Bob takes us all the way back to 1971 and that Powell memo, which really ends up that was like the first big linchpin in the House of Cards that has since unfolded.
Yeah, I mean, there's one way to think about growing economic inequality as a consequence of globalization and technological change, because our economy has become more global, and technological change and the advent of machines replacing repetitive task work like assembly line work has changed the economy greatly. But what we really focus on in Saving Capitalism is the issue of, as economic inequality grows, so does power. The power that business has wielded to write the rules of the economic system since economic inequality started growing is as big of an issue as economic inequality itself. So in other words, economic inequality didn't just happen. It's not like the weather. It's a product of a series of rules of how the system works written over time that benefit the wealthy and hurt regular people. And until we understand that, the role that power plays in terms of controlling our democracy and our institutions and our economic system and the way all of this stuff is interconnected, we really can't discuss solutions. This is something we have to understand before we can, figure out how to fix it.
Well, something that you and Bob point out in the film that I thought was really, I mean, a very basic, simple concept when you look at it, that there is no such thing as deregulation. There's regulation, period. Some kind of regulation for things.
Yeah, and there's no free market. So for so long you see this debate, this false debate, really, that's been going on between conservatives arguing for a free market and those who would call themselves liberals arguing for more regulation. But you really just have a system, and the question is just who the rules of that system benefit and who they hurt. And there's if you decrease regulation, for instance, supposedly of the financial markets, well, then you have a different kind of government intervention in the form of bailouts for Wall Street when the system crashes. So you don't ever have a system that's devoid of rules. That would be that just doesn't make any sense in a society of our scale. You just have a system of rules who benefit some and who hurt others. And understanding who they benefit and who they hurt is really what Saving Capitalism, the film, is all about.
And of course, I think it really is expressed well through the idea of wealth. Wealth breeds political power, and that is what changes the rules, and not necessarily in a good way for the 90% out there.
Absolutely. I think this question of the vicious cycle that our economy has been in for the last 40 years, where economic inequality grows, this creates more political power for the people who have the money, and this creates the ability to write the rules so that the economic system works better for them. This cycle is a bad one for the economy. And really what we try to address in the film is that this isn't inevitable, that these are rules made by people, and once they were written to benefit the wealthy and the powerful, we can rewrite them to benefit the rest of us on the one hand. But it's going to require a serious effort, some sort of a increasing awareness, possibly some sort of a change in the way we address the system to make it work. It's not a matter of coming up with a specific policy solution. I think, as Bob often says, policy solutions are plentiful. He has policy solutions to burn. Others have lots of good policy solutions. The real question is how we understand how the system works, and people sort of rising up to push for positive social change. It is possible. We've done it before in American history. We've done it after the last Gilded Age of the 1890s. We did it in the first progressive era that started around 1900, and we did it again in 1930s with the New Deal. But when capitalism goes off the rails, it requires a particular kind of effort, a particular kind of changing the way we understand how the system works, so that we can mobilize collectively to act as a kind of countervailing power to the moneyed interests that are now running the system.
You know, what I find particularly interesting about the making of Saving Capitalism, when did you and Bob decide to make a documentary based on this book? Was that going in from the beginning when he was writing the book? Did the two of you figure, okay, this would make a good documentary? Because when you started filming, we were in the 2016 election cycle with Jeb Bush and Hillary as front runners. So needless to say, anything that you might have plotted and planned for the, as Bob referred to it, for Inequality for All, the spine of the documentary, that had to go out the window.
Oh, my goodness. I have to tell you, just on a personal level, what a challenge it was making this film, because we did start making it in 2015, and Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush were the front runners. It was kind of Bob's great insight in the book that he saw these two interconnected ideas. One of them was he saw that, broadly speaking, the economic system of left versus right that had dominated, the Democrats and the Republicans wasn't really the coming story. It was going to be establishment versus anti-establishment. That when you have 90% of the people across the economic spectrum, the Tea Party conservatives in the bottom 90%, and the Bernie Sanders liberals on the left, that these folks just were angry with the system that they thought was rigged and that wasn't working for them. And he saw that coming before it was the story of the presidential election cycle. So I thought when we set out to make the film that we were going to make a kind of warning, a film about how the system was going to change next time, honestly. And we were surprised at how quickly it actually changed. And, it was an amazing process making a film about something that you think is a scary future that is coming, and to see that happen while you're see that future, become the present while you're making the film. That changed everything in how we made the film, and really caused me to kind of, go through a serious period of, losing focus about what I thought the film should be about. So this film now, I think, is more timely than ever, but it was a really amazing process, making a film, and one I hope that I never have to go through again.
For other directors because we've got a lot of industry people that listen to the show, and a lot of directors, you mentioned how you lost focus. How did you regain your focus and get yourself back on track?
Well, to go back to your previous question, you asked how the film is generated, and or how it comes about in Bob's writing process and in our collaboration. And I sort of had a feeling coming out of Inequality for All that there was a sense that I had that people felt that the economy was a bit like the weather, that it just sort of happened to them. And that when you have this growing economic inequality, that they felt sort of powerless to change it. And I thought this issue of power was central, and I wanted to make a film that sort of addressed that issue. And it turns out Bob was interested in the same subject. The way he came to it in Saving Capitalism is all his own. But we have meetings every week. We talk about short videos that we're making on a weekly basis. And I think, I hope that there's some sort of back and forth and collaboration about the ideas, that we think are kind of most central to focus on. And I think, in an interesting way, if I could say how I've maybe influenced Bob a bit, is that I think he started thinking about Saving Capitalism as a film at the same time he was thinking about it as a book. And when he thinks about ideas now, he thinks about how can they be communicated visually in addition to how he might write them down as sort of text. So that sort of is a collaboration that's sort of ongoing. When you talk about focus and getting it back, that first principle of power, of how power to change the system and shape the system in ways that sort of benefit the many and how the powerful have used power to shape the system to benefit the few. That basic core principle is the thing I kept coming back to. Even when I sort of lost focus and all of the Trump domination of the news cycle made me think, maybe this should be a Trump movie in some way. What I realized is if Trump wasn't there, there would have to be another Trump, that it's not about sort of Donald Trump or replacing him. It's about the underlying system that makes our political and economic system vulnerable to people like Donald Trump, and it's not about him in particular. So this is a film that sort of steps out and sort of takes the bigger picture of the question.
How did you go about determining, because I know Bob is a great communicator, and he can, people that you think are so diametrically opposed to him, he can get them to talk in a jovial and an amicable way. You've got a variety of interview subjects here. You've got Annie Presley. You've got the young McDonald's worker, Guadalupe. You've got the Bentley farmers. An interesting, and then the young woman, Victoria, suffering from cancer. You have 4 seminal interviews in here, individuals who were affected by, we have a farmer, highly impacted by the economic situation. We've got Guadalupe, who, she's an immigrant. She's here. She's working in a minimum wage job. Then we've got Victoria with the health crisis when she finds out that her insurance will not pay for all of her chemo drugs. So you have these hot button topic subjects here. How did you go about narrowing it down to these individuals?
Yeah, no, it's and not just them. We also have David Bratt, who is the second most conservative member of Congress, as rated by some service that rates such things.
And he and Bob are they're seeing eye to eye on so many things involving the economy.
Yeah, no, it was the initial idea with the film was, as Bob went around on a book tour, we were going to see if we could have him interact with people who didn't necessarily agree with him. So often we're in our bubbles. All of us are in our bubbles in social media or whatever way we interact with the news. And we don't talk with people who don't agree with us that much. And one of the central ideas in the book and in the film is that it's not about if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It's about if, broadly speaking, you're in the group of the economy for which you feel the political and economic system works, or if you're in the group that feels like it's rigged and it isn't working for you. And so we wanted to talk with people who, on its surface, might not agree with Bob, both from the left, some people who think capitalism isn't worth saving, but also from the right, people who don't normally, talk about just economic issues across the political spectrum. We wanted to put Bob in contact with them and just see what happened. Did they have anything in common? Did they have fights? Was there going to be a fist fight? Were they going to agree? We didn't know, and that was kind of the fun of making it. And what we found is something kind of profound. I mean, I think that people have a way of connecting that goes across the political spectrum if you can focus on that, if you can focus on the right issues, on the economic issues. You learn something about our differences and how we see things eye to eye sometimes that maybe you might not see in a traditional political film.
Yeah, I mean, I think your selection, the individuals that you focused on, I think really express you capture and cover some of the main issues that is the commonality amongst everybody. And I love the way you and your editors, Sari Gilman and Catherine, have put together the doc with spacing this out and the progression with the way you and Bob have designed this, including, I have to say, I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of the animation and the graphics and charts that you and Bob put in your films.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think for Inequality for All, it was, I think, the central idea with that film that we take a genuinely personal story, follow a character on a journey, just like you would in any narrative film, and then you try to use that as a jumping off point to discuss big ideas. And those big ideas could be, conveyed through animations. They could be conveyed in a number of different ways. But that basic idea we sort of return to in Saving Capitalism. We follow Bob on a 40 or 50-year journey in his political odyssey, what he's seen, how it's felt to him personally, and then we track how the economy and the democracy has changed over that time as well. So following those 2 points is really, it's easier said than done, but it really is the kind of, the basic ingredients to making both Saving Capitalism and Inequality for All.
And of course, I think a lot of people may not realize that Bob actually interned for Robert F. Kennedy.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, he ran the was it the signature machine? You know, when you got a letter from Robert Kennedy, he would sign his name, and Bob ran that machine.
Yeah, so he truly has seen it all in his time. You know, from RFK to the FTC to Clinton, and everything in between and since. I mean, it's just amazing. And the fact that Bob can step back and look at things objectively and explain everything, and you as a filmmaker can come in and also embrace that, understand it, and explain it in tandem with him is so beneficial. And it's something so desperately needed. And I'm so glad the two of you are filling that void.
Well, thank you. It really is an honor to work with him. And it's been now a long collaboration, an 8-year collaboration. But, it's things like this that sort of keep you going. I think for anybody who's been watching the system unravel and has been trying to sound the alarm for as long as he has, and in a much shorter sense that I have, you feel it sometimes like you're screaming in the wind, and nobody's hearing it. So you keep making the films, you keep talking about it if you're him, and you hope that people watch, and you hope that the darkest hour is just before the dawn, and that this is going to turn around.
Well, and following up on that, in addition to the feature documentaries, you've got your nonprofit with Bob, Inequality Media, and all of these little shorts that the two of you keep doing.
Yeah, it's amazing, just his energy level. He really does run me and all of us who work with him ragged.
Are you having trouble? You having trouble keeping up with the man?
It's amazing his energy level. But yeah, we make videos at least once a week these days, and we put them out mostly on social media. And those videos have been seen over 250 million times over the last few years.
Wow!
So the audience for those is remarkable, and it really acts as a kind of laboratory for ideas that then we've put into both Inequality for All and Saving Capitalism. But people are also they're in their workday often, and they can watch like 2 or 3 minutes about why the Republican tax bill right now is so crazy, and they can take that amount of time. They don't have the time always to watch a feature film. So what we try to do is use the feature films as the kind of giant pebbles in the pond that sort of, I hope, have a long life, and people can watch them as they have time to kind of understand the big picture all at once. But, the short videos act as a really important piece to communicating the full story as well. So I'm glad to be doing both.
Well, I have to tell you, and you can pass this along to Bob since I haven't gotten to talk to him about Saving Capitalism yet. A couple years ago, actually, when the whole election thing started and Bob really started having a much bigger presence on social media, on Facebook, between he and Dan Rather local bar in Culver City that I go to. All of a sudden one day, 3 of us were sitting there looking at a video that Bob had done, a short little video. We didn't know each other, nothing. And at the same time, we were all looking at one of Bob's videos, and it just opened up a whole dialogue. And it's amazing how many people look to Bob and respect him for the information he imparts. And the biggest thing everybody talks about is you understand it when he explains it.
Yeah.
But
no, it's
no, go
it's
ahead.
really nice of you to say, and I odds on directed that video because I make all those short ones. But I find that's why I gravitated to Bob in the first place as well. I was trying to understand the financial crisis of 2008, and I felt the more news I watched and the more I tried to understand it through the news, the more confused I got.
Mm-hmm.
But when I really wanted to get it, listening to Bob or reading Bob is really how I understood it best. He really does have an amazing ability to break down these complex issues in a way you understand, and you really do feel like you get it when you hear him say it. That's a gift, an amazing gift, and I'm glad you had the same experience I did.
Oh, but I just, I find it because there are certain afternoons I can just pop in, and inevitably, if one of us is there that now knows each other, that, we follow Bob and we follow Dan Rather, it's like, hey, have you seen what Bob posted on Facebook today?
Wow.
So, it's like silly little people like us, just in the middle of the day, what are we looking at? We are looking at Bob Reich videos and reading Dan Rather News and Guts.
Well, thank you. On behalf of him, thank you.
Which, it's very funny because for our interview that we had done for Inequality for All, and you and Bob and I talked about cynicism. And Bob said that in the interview, he goes, cynicism is dangerous because people throw up their hands and say it's not possible. Why should I even try? That's the end of the road. But, he believes we should all combat cynicism. And I love what you close out Saving Capitalism with, where you have Bob giving the 3 points of what you should do, what you can do to save capitalism, to essentially save democracy at this point. Be tenacious and patient. Talk to people who disagree with you, but have some fun.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, the idea here is this economic situation we're in, and the political economic situation we're in, can be dark for a lot of people. And the way Bob and I initially connected was over a sense of humor. We made each other laugh, and that's one of the ways that he keeps going, and it's definitely one of the things we try to remember in our work. And I think it's important to anybody who is learning all of this dark information is, firstly, stay hopeful. Don't give in to cynicism, and try to laugh and have fun. This is in some ways, as Bob describes it, he's 71 years old, and some of the darkest times he can remember, politically and economically. And I think that's really saying something for somebody who's been doing it as long as he has. Mm-hmm. But he still has a good time. We still have a good time working. So that's the only way to keep going. You can't give in to the desire to just put your head under the covers and not go outside or not pay attention, because then you seed the system, as you said, to the wealthy people who are making the rules right now. So having a good time is important.
Well, and of course, we all know about your sense of humor. Anybody that's seen Love and Taxes that you did with your brother Josh.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another whole avenue of the whole economic thing, but the two of you approach that in a comedic narrative.
Absolutely.
You are so ingrained in this, in keeping us advised, apprised, and educated and enlightened on our economic situation on multiple fronts, Jacob. I can't, I could talk to you forever about this, but unfortunately we are out of time. But very quickly, before I let you go, where else can people find your videos that you and Bob do other than Bob's social media accounts?
Yeah, well, if you look up Inequality Media, either on, just punch it in and it'll either come up as Facebook or on YouTube. You can watch all of our videos. That's the name of our nonprofit. But they also all show up on Robert Reich Facebook page fairly regularly. So I suggest everybody out there subscribe to that and be appraised. It's a very informative page, and all of our videos are there as well.
And then Saving Capitalism is on Netflix right now. And after everybody spends all their money on Black Friday and now today, Cyber Monday, they really should watch the documentary.
Absolutely.
Jacob, thank you so much. It is always such a joy to talk to you, and I love having you on the show. And I hope you'll come back.
What a pleasure.
I hope you'll come back again.
Absolutely. Whenever you'll have me.
I will have you anytime. Jacob, thank you again, everybody. Saving Capitalism on Netflix now. All right. Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
Great interview. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
And that is all the time we have today. We'll be back next week. We've got 3 or 4 guests already lined up for you. So until then, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.